Chapter 1. The Lantern in the Night. If you were to stand perfectly still, on a quiet hill, far away from the hum of the city, and wait for the sun to dip below the horizon, you would eventually feel a change in the air. The day's heat rises and vanishes, leaving a coolness that settles on the skin. The colors of the world, the greens of the trees, the blues of the sky, drain away into monochrome shades of gray and indigo. And then, if the timing is right, a silver rim appears in the east. It is not a sudden light like the sun, but a slow, rising presence. It climbs inch by inch until it hangs suspended in the vast, velvet architecture of the night. The moon. It is the oldest companion we have ever known. Before there were maps, before there were compasses, before there was even language to describe it, there was this lantern in the night. It has watched over the sleep of every human being who has ever lived. It shone on the first fires of our ancestors huddled in caves. It guided the Polynesian wayfinders across the terrifying blackness of the Pacific. It illuminated the pages of astronomers in stone towers, scratching equations onto parchment by candlelight. It is the keeper of our tides, pulling the heavy oceans back and forth in a rhythmic breath that mimics our own. Inhale. Exhale, high tide, low tide, a gravitational heartbeat that has continued uninterrupted for 4.5 billion years. Tonight, we are going to journey to this silent world, but we are not going there to shout, or to argue, or to debate with anger. We are going there to observe. We are going to drift through the history and the physics of the moment when humanity finally reached out and touched that silver face. There is a story, whispered in the corners of the internet and shouted in the public squares, that we never went. That the great journey of 1969 was a theater piece, a shadow play performed on a soundstage to deceive the world. It is a story that persists, not necessarily out of malice, but perhaps out of a kind of vertigo. The leap was so great, the machinery so primitive, the distance so incomprehensible, that the mind recoils. It feels safer, in a way, to believe that it was a trick. It is easier to believe in human deception than it is to believe in human transcendence. To accept that we strapped ourselves to a pillar of fire and navigated the void fields. Impossible. And so the doubt takes root. It asks, why does the flag wave? Where are the stars? Why are the shadows wrong? Tonight, we will answer those questions. Not with the harsh gavel of a courtroom, but with the gentle precision of a watchmaker examining a complex gear. We will slow down time. We will zoom in until the grain of the film becomes visible. We will look at the behavior of light in a vacuum, the movement of dust in low gravity, and the silent testimony of the rocks themselves. We will find that the answers do not require a conspiracy. They require only physics. And physics, when viewed closely, is a kind of magic all its own. Imagine, for a moment, that we are entering a viewing room. The walls are lined with velvet. The air is cool and still. There is a comfortable chair here, waiting just for you. As you sit back, the lights dim until the room is pitch black. The only light comes from a single projector, beaming a cone of pale luminance into the dust motes dancing in the air. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let the events of your day, the noise, the demands, the urgency, fade into the background noise, like static on an old radio, until they are gone completely. Here in this quiet space, we are free to wonder. We are free to look at the moon not as a target or a controversy, but as a place, a real place. A world of silence where the footprints left 50 years ago still look as fresh as if they were made this morning. The thesis of our journey tonight is simple. Reality is often stranger and far more beautiful than fiction. The story of how we went to the moon is filled with details so improbable, so delicate, and so terrifying that no screenwriter would have dared to invent them. So close your eyes if you wish, or keep them softly focused on the screen of your mind. We are going to travel back through the decades, back before the internet, before the cell phone, back to a time when the world was analog and the skies were open. We are going back to the beginning, to the moment when we decided to leave the cradle of the earth and sail into the great dark ocean above. Listen, can you hear the silence? That is the sound of space. It is a silence that is not empty but full. It is waiting for us. In the mythologies of old, the moon was a goddess, Selene driving her chariot across the heavens, Chang floating up to the lunar palace, Thoth the measurer of time. We projected our dreams onto that blank white canvas. We saw faces in the craters, the man in the moon, the rabbit pounding rice. We saw a mirror of ourselves. But the reality of the moon is something different. It is a world of gray, a monochrome desert of pulverized glass and ancient lava flows. It is a place where the sun burns hot enough to boil water, and the shadows are cold enough to freeze air. It is a place of extremes, existing in a vacuum so perfect that sound cannot travel. If a mountain were to crumble on the moon, it would fall in total silence. To go there, to actually go there, required us to master the forces of nature in a way we never had before. We had to tame fire. We had to calculate the orbits of celestial bodies with slide rules and pencils. We had to build a ship that could sustain fragile human life in an environment designed to extinguish it. And we did. The skepticism that surrounds this event is, in a way, a testament to how miraculous it actually was. When we look at the footage today, grainy, ghostly, surreal, it looks like a dream. And dreams are often hard to distinguish from reality. But the evidence is there. It is hidden in the way a speck of dust falls. It is hidden in the reflection of a visor. It is hidden in the mirrors sitting on the lunar surface right now, bouncing lasers back to Earth in a silent, continuous conversation. As we embark on this examination, I want you to let go of the need to be right. Let go of the need to be convinced. Just observe. Let the facts float past you like clouds. Think of the moon tonight. Perhaps it is outside your window right now, watching over you as you rest. It is the same moon that looked down on the pyramids being built, the same moon that lit the path for the Roman legions, the same moon that Shakespeare wrote about. It is indifferent to our doubts. It does not care if we believe we walked on its surface. It simply is. It hangs there, a giant stone sphere, locked in a gravitational waltz with our home. There is a comfort in that permanence. In a world where everything changes so fast, where technology shifts, where news cycles spin, where our own lives rush by, the moon remains. It is the steady anchor in our sky. And 50 years ago, for a brief, shining moment, we touched it. We left our footprints in the soil of another world. And because there is no wind on the moon, no rain to wash them away, those footprints are still there. They are waiting, frozen in time, a monument to human curiosity that will last longer than the pyramids, longer than the cities we live in, perhaps longer than humanity itself. So, settle in. The projector is whirring to life. The film is threading through the sprockets. The countdown is beginning, but it is a slow countdown. A countdown to calm. 10, the world is slowing down. 9, the noise is fading away. 8, you are safe. 7, you are warm. 6, the gravity of the day is lifting. 5, we are becoming weightless. 4, the sky is turning from blue to black. 3, the stars are appearing one by one. 2, the destination is in sight. 1, let us begin the ascent. Chapter 2, the Leviathan. To leave the earth. To truly sever the invisible bonds of gravity that hold us to the grass and the stone, requires a force of nature. For thousands of years, we could only dream of flight. We watched the birds catch the thermal currents, drifting effortlessly in circles. We watched the smoke from our fires rise and dissipate into the gray sky. We built kites of silk and bamboo, sending our prayers up on strings, hoping they might touch the clouds. But the moon is not in the clouds. It sits far beyond the thin blue veil of our atmosphere, in the deep, silent ocean of the vacuum. To reach it, we could not simply fly. We had to burst through the ceiling of the world. And so we built a Leviathan. In the humid, salt-heavy air of a Florida morning, amidst the sawgrass and the herons of the coast, it stood waiting. The Saturn V, it is difficult, even now, to comprehend the sheer scale of this machine. It was not merely a vehicle, it was a cathedral of aluminum and alloy. Imagine a skyscraper, 36 stories tall, pristine white, standing alone on a flat green marsh. If you were to stand at its base, looking up, the top would seem to vanish into the haze of the sky. It was heavier than a destroyer ship of the Navy, yet it was designed to float on a pillar of fire. It was a monument to height and mass, a white obelisk dedicated to the single, audacious purpose of departure. Inside this shell, hidden from the humid air, was a clockwork mechanism of terrifying complexity. There were not hundreds or thousands, but millions of individual parts. Valves no larger than a fingernail, fuel pumps the size of automobiles, miles of wiring woven like a nervous system through the metal skin. It was a symphony written in metal. Each instrument, from the smallest switch to the largest tank, had to play its note at the exact perfect millisecond. If one violin is out of tune, the symphony continues. But here, if one valve stuck, if one seal failed, the music would end in silence. And yet it stood there, humming with potential energy. A dormant giant, breathing quietly as the liquid oxygen, cold as the deepest winters of Neptune, flowed into its veins, venting white plumes of vapor that drifted lazily down its sides like a waterfall of mist. Sound cue. A low, resonant rumble begins, felt more than heard. Then came the ignition. It did not begin with a roar, but with a flash. A sudden, blinding light at the base, brighter than the Florida sun. And for a moment, there was silence. The light traveled faster than the sound. But then the sound arrived. It was not a scream. It was a vibration. A physical wave of pressure that moved through the air, shaking the ground for miles. It was a sound so deep, so rich with low frequencies, that it resonated in the chest cavities of the spectators 3 miles away. It was the sound of the earth itself cracking open. 5 F1 engines, the most powerful machines ever built by human hands, roared to life. They consumed fuel at a rate that could drain an Olympic swimming pool in moments. They channeled the explosive power of a small nuclear weapon into a controlled, directed stream of pure thrust. And slowly, impossibly, the Leviathan began to rise. It did not shoot up like a firework. It rose with a majestic, heavy slowness. It seemed to hang in the air, defying the logic of your eyes. You could watch it clear the tower, inch by inch, painting a column of white smoke against the blue canvas of the sky. It was a whale breaching the surface of the ocean, heavy and wet, pushing against the weight of the water. The sheer inertia of it, the struggle between the gravity of the planet and the fire of the engines, was a ballet of forces. Down below, 1,000,000 pairs of eyes watched. They stood on the beaches of Cocoa and Titusville. They sat on the hoods of station wagons, shading their eyes with their hands. People in sunglasses, children in swimsuits, grandparents in lawn chairs. A sea of humanity, silent and united, watching their representatives leave the world. At that moment, there was no division. There was no politics. There was only the collective holding of breath. The feeling that the earth itself was shrinking, that we were all standing on a single, small island, watching a ship set sail for the dark horizon. As the rocket climbed, it began to tilt. This was not an accident. It was the gravity turn. A gentle, mathematical arc calculated to perfection. To get into orbit, you do not just go up. You must go sideways. You must run so fast that when you fall, you miss the earth. The rocket pierced the clouds, leaving a hole in the vapor. The sky turned from a bright tropical blue to a deep, bruising purple, and finally to the absolute black of space. And then a moment of profound change. Sound cue. The rumble fades out completely, replaced by a high, thin tone and then silence. The first stage, the massive booster that had lifted the weight of the world, finished its job. Its fuel was spent. Its fire was extinguished. With a series of small, explosive bolts firing in silence, the stage detached. The bottom half of the skyscraper fell away. Watch it in your mind's eye. This massive cylinder, charred and empty, tumbling slowly and Doverin back towards the clouds. It fell silently through the upper atmosphere, a discarded shell returning to the ocean. It would splash down in the Atlantic, sinking through the blue waters down into the dark and the cold to rest on the seabed. A modern shipwreck settling into the silt, where the fish would swim through the engines that once burned with the heat of a star. But the upper ship, the craft carrying the 3 men, continued on, lighter now, freer. The second stage ignited, a silent blue flame in the vacuum pushing them faster and faster. They were no longer fighting the air. They were slipping through the void, riding a smooth, parabolic curve towards the sunrise. The violence of the launch was over. The vibration ceased. The heavy G-forces that had pressed the astronauts into their couches lifted. They were floating. Below them, the curve of the Earth revealed itself, a glowing sapphire crescent against the eternal night. The atmosphere, that thick blanket of air that shields us, looked no thicker than the skin of an apple. The Leviathan had done its work. It had delivered them to the shore of the cosmic ocean. The noise, the fire, the smoke, it was all left behind in the heavy air of Florida. Now, there was only the forward momentum, the silent coasting. The ship was no longer a skyscraper fighting gravity. It was a silver needle threading the fabric of space, drifting away from the noise of history, drifting away from the arguments and the doubts, drifting towards the gray and silent world that waited for them, 3 days away. Take a moment to feel that transition. The shift from the heavy, shaking power of the ascent to the absolute crystalline stillness of orbit. You are weightless. The concept of up and down has vanished. There is only forward and back. Back towards the blue home. Forward towards the gray destination. The engines are cold. The ship is coasting on the memory of fire. It is a quiet voyage now. A long, silent fall around the planet gathering speed, preparing for the final push that will send them out of the cradle forever. Rest in this quiet. The hard part is over. We have escaped the gravity well. We are free. Chapter 3, The Dance of the Flag. We have left the fire of the launch behind. We have drifted through the silence of the voyage. And now, in our mind's eye, we are standing on the surface. The ground beneath our feet is a charcoal gray, a powder so fine it feels like flour. The horizon is too close, curving away sharply, a reminder that this world is smaller than our own. And above, the sky is an abyss of absolute black, even though the sun is blazing with a blinding, unfiltered intensity. In the center of this stark alien stage, there is a splash of color. Red, white, blue, the American flag. It stands there, bright and defiant against the monochrome landscape. And if you watch the footage, that grainy, ghostly television signal beamed back across 240,000 miles, you might notice something that feels wrong. As the astronauts work around it, planting the pole into the stubborn lunar soil, the fabric seems to ripple. It flutters. It undulates with a chaotic, rhythmic energy. To our eyes, trained by a lifetime of living at the bottom of an ocean of air, it looks like one thing and one thing only: wind. It looks like a breeze is catching the corner of the cloth, snapping it back and forth. And this visual, this simple, intuitive movement, has become the cornerstone of the doubt. How, the question asks, can a flag wave in a vacuum? If there is no air, there is no wind. If there is no wind, there should be no movement. Therefore, the scene must be on Earth, in a studio, where a draft from an air conditioner or an open door caught the fabric. It is a logical thought, but the intuition of Earth fails us when we enter the domain of the vacuum. To understand the dance of the flag, we must unlearn what we know about movement. We must look at the physics of nothingness. Let us first look at the object itself. This was not an ordinary flag bought from a hardware store. A standard flag, if planted on the moon, would simply hang limp, a sad ribbon of color drooping down the pole, indistinguishable and uninspiring. To ensure the symbol was visible, the engineers designed a mechanism. Imagine a telescoping rod, gold anodized aluminum, hidden inside the top hem of the nylon. It was an L-shaped structure, The astronauts had to plant the vertical pole and then extend the horizontal bar to hold the fabric out flat, like a curtain on a rod. But on that historic day with Apollo 11, the mechanism was stiff. The horizontal rod would not extend fully. The fabric, which had been packed tight in a small canister for the journey, remained bunched up. It retained the memory of its folding. The wrinkles you see in the photographs are not ripples caused by wind. They are permanent creases, stiff and frozen, like a piece of paper that has been crumpled and then smoothed out. But what of the movement, the fluttering? Here we meet the ghost of Isaac Newton. On Earth we live in a thick soup of atmosphere. Nitrogen, oxygen, argon. It is heavy. It presses against us with 14 pounds of force per square inch. When you move your hand through the air, you are pushing billions of molecules out of the way. If you push a child on a swing and then stop pushing, the swing eventually stops. Why? Because the air is stealing the energy. It drags against the child, slowing them down. This is called damping. The air is a dampener. It is a blanket that smothers motion. But on the moon, there is no blanket. There is no soup. There is only the void. When an astronaut grabs the aluminum pole to twist it into the ground, he is injecting energy into the system. He twists his wrist. That energy travels down the metal, into the horizontal rod, and into the fabric itself. On Earth, the air would instantly grab that fabric. The friction of the atmosphere would suck the energy out of the nylon within seconds, and the flag would settle. But in the vacuum, there is nothing to steal the energy. There is no air resistance. There is no drag. The energy is trapped in the cloth. Imagine a pendulum. If you place a pendulum in a tank of thick oil and pull it back, it will swing once, slowly, and stop. The oil absorbs the motion. That is Earth. Now imagine a pendulum in a jar where all the air has been removed. If you pull it back and let go, it will swing, and swing, and swing. It will keep moving for a long time because nothing is touching it to say stop. This is what happened to the flag. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin twisted the pole, the nylon began to swing like a pendulum. Without air to dampen it, the fabric flapped wildly, carrying the momentum of their hands long after they let go. It was not waving in the wind. It was waving because of the inertia. It was the pure, unadulterated conservation of momentum, a physics experiment performed on a galactic stage. And then we see the proof of the silence. If you watch the footage carefully, wait for the moment when the astronauts step away. Wait for the moment when they stop manipulating the pole. On Earth, even if you step away from a flag, a breeze might still catch it. It might flutter gently on its own. But on the moon, the moment the energy from the astronaut's hand dissipates, absorbed by the friction of the cloth fibers themselves, the flag freezes. It becomes a statue. There is a haunting stillness to it. It does not sway. It does not twitch. It holds its crumpled, rippled shape with absolute rigidity, as if it were made of painted tin rather than fabric. The wind dies the instant the human touch is removed. This is the signature of the vacuum. Violent motion caused by contact, followed by absolute, rock-solid paralysis. If you look at the sequence of photos taken seconds apart, the wrinkles in the flag never change. The shadows of the folds remain locked in place. In a windy studio, the fabric would shift, even slightly. The light would dance across the texture. But here, it is a still life. It is beautiful in a way. It reminds us that motion is a gift of energy. On Earth, the wind gifts energy to the trees, to the water, to the flags. The world is constantly moving because the air is constantly moving. But the moon is a world without gifts. Nothing moves unless it is touched. A rock will sit in the same position for 1 billion years unless a meteor strikes it or a boot kicks it. The dust lies still. The flag stands frozen. It is a world of pause. A world where time seems to have stopped holding its breath. So when you see that red, white, and blue fabric dancing on the screen, do not see the wind. See the echo of a human hand. See the energy of a man from Ohio, traveling through a metal pole, flowing into a piece of nylon, and struggling to find a way out in a place where nothing exists to catch it. See the inertia. See the laws of nature playing out in their rawest, most naked form. The flag is not waving at us. It is remembering the touch that placed it there. And once that memory fades, it returns to the deep, eternal sleep of the moon. Rest your mind on that image. The bright colors against the black sky, perfectly still. A silent sentinel standing watch over the footprints we left behind. Chapter 4, Shadows and Perspective. We are still standing on the sea of tranquility. The flag is motionless behind us, a statue of color in a world of gray. But now, I want you to turn your gaze downward. Look at the ground beneath your boots. The surface of the moon is not like a paved road. It is not flat. It is a chaotic, undulating ocean of frozen waves. It is scarred by billions of years of impacts, craters within craters, hills that rise gently and fall sharply, valleys of dust that have never known the caress of rain. And across this jagged landscape, the sun paints its picture. On Earth, our light is soft. It is scattered by the atmosphere, diffusing into the blue sky, bouncing off the clouds, wrapping around corners. Shadows on Earth are rarely sharp. They are soft, fuzzy things that fade gently into the light. But here, there is no atmosphere. There is no scattering. The sun is a single, blindingly bright spotlight hanging in an abyss of black. It carves the world into two distinct realms. The blinding white of the illuminated rock, and the absolute, ink-black void of the shadow. It is in these shadows that the next question arises. If you look at the photographs brought back by the Apollo astronauts, you might notice something curious about the way the shadows fall. You might see the shadow of a lunar module and the shadow of a rock nearby, and notice that they do not seem to point in the same direction. They seem to splay out. They seem to converge or diverge like spokes on a wheel, rather than parallel lines running side by side. And the doubt whispers, if the sun is the only source of light, and it is 93 million miles away, shouldn't the shadows be perfectly parallel? The fact that they are not, the theory suggests, means there must have been studio lights. A spotlight here, a fill light there, creating a chaotic web of intersecting shadows on a soundstage. It is a visual puzzle, but the solution does not lie in a conspiracy. It lies in the trickery of our own eyes and the deceptive nature of perspective. Let us first consider the ground itself. Imagine you are walking through a forest on a late afternoon. The sun is low. The trees cast long shadows across the ground. If the ground is perfectly flat, those shadows will look like parallel bars. But what if the shadow of a tree falls across a sudden dip in the earth? What if it falls across a large rock or a steep hill? The shadow breaks. It bends. It follows the contour of the land. On the moon, the ground is deceptively rough. A shadow that falls on a downward slope will appear longer and tilted compared to a shadow that falls on an upward slope. The uneven terrain acts like a funhouse mirror, stretching and distorting the shapes of darkness. When you capture that three-dimensional chaos on a two-dimensional photograph, the angles look wrong. They look as if they are fleeing from different light sources, but they are simply draping themselves over the wrinkles of an ancient world. Now, let us talk about the vanish. There is a rule of art discovered by the painters of the Renaissance called perspective. It tells us that parallel lines, when viewed from a distance, appear to meet. Think of a railroad track. You know logically that the two steel rails never touch. They run perfectly parallel for hundreds of miles. Yet, if you stand in the middle of the tracks and look toward the horizon, what do you see? The rails rush toward each other. They converge at a single point in the distance, the vanishing point. The shadows on the moon are the railroad tracks. They are parallel physically. But because the camera is looking at them from an angle, and because they stretch out toward the horizon, they appear to converge. This is not a flaw in the scene. It is a law of geometry. If the shadows were perfectly parallel in the photograph, that would be the anomaly. That would be the impossibility. The behavior of light here is rigorous. It is mathematical. But it is also subject to the interpretation of the lens. There is another mystery in the shadows, a question of brightness. In some of the most famous images, we see an astronaut standing in the shadow of the lunar lander. According to the logic of deep space, if an object blocks the sun, the area behind it should be pitch black, absolute darkness. And yet, we can see the astronaut. We can see the folds of his suit, the tubes on his life support backpack, the tread on his boots. He is glowing softly in the dark. Where, the skeptic asks, is that light coming from? If there is no air to scatter sunlight, how is he illuminated? Is it a studio reflector, a hidden lamp? The answer is shimmering right beneath his feet. The moon is not a dark rock, it is a reflector. The lunar dust, the regolith, is composed of tiny, jagged fragments of glass and mineral. When the brutal sunlight hits the surface surrounding the shadow, it doesn't just vanish, it bounces. The ground itself acts as a massive, wraparound reflector. It catches the brilliance of the sun and throws it back up in every direction. It bathes the shadowed side of the lunar module and the astronaut standing within it in a soft, ghostly glow. And there is another source of light, a lantern in the sky far larger and brighter than the moon is to us. The Earth. Imagine standing on the moon and looking up. The Earth appears 4 times larger than the moon does in our sky. It is a swirling marble of blue oceans and white clouds, reflecting the sunlight with immense power. This Earthshine is bright enough to read a book by. It casts a cool, blue-tinted light into the deepest shadows of the lunar valleys. So the astronaut is never truly in the dark. He is standing in a complex intersection of lights, the blinding white of the sun, the upward glow of the lunar soil, and the soft, blue beacon of his home planet hanging overhead. It is a lighting setup, yes, but it is one arranged by the solar system itself. Close your eyes for a moment. I want to try an experiment of visualization. Imagine you are standing on a long, straight road in the desert at sunset. The sun is behind you, low and red. You cast a shadow that stretches out for 50 feet in front of you. Now, imagine a telephone pole next to you. It also casts a shadow. In your mind, look at those 2 shadows. They are parallel objects, but as they stretch away from you, they seem to pinch together, aiming for the horizon. Now, imagine the road is not flat. Imagine it is rolling like the waves of a solidified sea. Your shadow falls into a dip and leans left. The telephone pole's shadow hits a rise and leans right. In a photograph, this would look chaotic. It would look like mistakes were made. But standing there in the quiet of the desert, you understand. You feel the shape of the land. You understand that the light is straight, but the world is crooked. That is the moon. A crooked, silent, ancient world painted by a single, distant brush. There is something soothing about this realization. The universe follows rules. Even in the strangest, most alien environments, the laws of geometry hold true. Light travels in straight lines. Perspective draws them together. Surfaces reflect. We do not need complex conspiracies to explain what we see. We only need to understand how light behaves when it is stripped of the atmosphere, stripped of the familiar, and left to play on a stage of raw, unpolished geology. The shadows of the moon are not hiding secrets. They are simply marking time. They are the sundials of a dead world, stretching and retracting as the sun makes its slow, 2-week journey across the sky. Long, ink-black fingers reaching across the craters, pointing towards the night. Let yourself rest in that image, the sharp contrast, the clarity, the simple, silent interplay of light and dark. There is no ambiguity here, only the physics of a sunlit rock floating in the dark. The shadows are long, but they are natural. They are the signature of a real place, lit by a real star. And as we stand there watching the light shift imperceptibly, we realize that we are seeing the universe as it truly is, unfiltered, stark, and breathtakingly precise. Chapter 5, The Missing Stars. We have examined the gray dust beneath our boots. We have watched the flag dance its silent pendulum swing. We have traced the long, converging fingers of the shadows. Now, I want you to tilt your head back. Lift your eyes from the bright, sun-drenched surface and look up into the heavens. Above the lunar horizon, There is no blue sky. There are no clouds to catch the light, no atmosphere to scatter the sun into a comfortable azure dome. There is only the void, a ceiling of absolute crushing blackness that stretches on for infinity. It is here, in this deep well of night, that the doubt finds its strongest foothold. If you look at the photographs, those beautiful high-resolution portraits of history, you will see the astronauts, the lander, the flag, and the rocks. But behind them, the sky is empty. It is a flat, matte black, a void without texture. And the whisper asks, where are the stars? We know that space is not empty. We know that the universe is crowded with billions of suns, galaxies, and nebulas. Without an atmosphere to block them, shouldn't the lunar sky be a blazing tapestry of diamonds? Shouldn't the stars be brighter, sharper, and more numerous than anything seen from Earth? The absence of these lights in the photographs feels, to our intuition, like an error. It feels like a stagehand forgot to paint the backdrop. It suggests that we are in a studio with a black velvet curtain, rather than standing on the shore of the cosmos. But the missing stars are not a sign of deception. They are a sign of intensity. To find them, we must understand the limitations of the mechanical eye and the overwhelming power of the lunar day. Let us remember where we are. We are standing on the moon, and it is daytime. On Earth, when we think of a black sky, we think of night. We think of darkness. But on the moon, the color of the sky has nothing to do with the time of day. The sky is black simply because there is nothing there to hold the light. The sun is still overhead. It is a thermonuclear explosion suspended in the void, radiating with a ferocity that we, under our blanket of air, can barely comprehend. Its light hits the lunar surface, that vast expanse of gray powder and glass, and explodes outward. The ground is not just lit, it is glowing. The white space suits of the astronauts are reflecting almost all the light that hits them. The gold foil on the lander is burning with brilliance. The scene is brighter than a desert at high noon. Now, imagine the camera. A camera is a simple machine. It is a box with a hole in it, designed to capture light on a strip of chemical film. It is a mechanical eye, and like your eye, it has a pupil, an iris, an aperture. When you walk from a dark room into a bright, sunlit snowfield, what happens? You squint. Your pupils contract to pinpoints. Your eyes try to shut out the overwhelming glare to protect themselves. If they didn't, you would be blinded by the white light. The camera must do the same. To capture a photograph of Neil Armstrong in his bright white suit, standing on the bright gray ground, the astronauts had to set the camera to squint. They had to use a fast shutter speed, a fraction of a second and a small aperture. They had to tell the camera, only let in a tiny amount of light and only for a heartbeat. If they had left the shutter open longer, the astronaut would have dissolved into a blob of pure white light. The details of the suit, the flag, and the lander would have been washed away by the glare. But here is the tragedy of the stars. Stars, even in space, are faint. They are delicate pinpoints of light traveling across light years of darkness. To see them, you need to open your eyes wide. You need to let the light soak in. You need a long exposure. You cannot have both. You cannot capture the blazing brilliance of a sunlit astronaut and the faint whisper of a distant star in the same single frame of film. It is a question of dynamic range. The difference between the brightest object and the darkest object is simply too great for the film to bridge. Think of it this way. Imagine you are standing on the 50-yard line of a massive football stadium at night. The floodlights are on. They are blasting down onto the field with millions of watts of power. The grass is blindingly green. The players' uniforms are vivid and bright. If you take a picture of the quarterback, the background behind him, the upper stands, and the sky above the stadium will be pitch black. We know the stars are there above the stadium lights. We know the city is there beyond the walls, but the camera cannot see them. It is too busy dealing with the floodlights. It has sacrificed the shadows to save the highlights. That is the moon, a stadium lit by the sun, surrounded by the infinite night. So the stars are missing from the photographs not because they weren't there, but because they were drowned out by the noise of the day. They were the quietest voices in a room where the sun was screaming. But did the astronauts see them? This is a question that touches on the human experience of the void. If you listen to the transcripts, the astronauts rarely mention the stars while they are working on the surface. Why? Because they were also squinting. Their helmets were equipped with gold-coated visors, thick and reflective, designed to act like heavy sunglasses. They were working in a landscape of glare. Their pupils were constricted. As long as they were looking at the ground, at the equipment, or at each other, their eyes were adapted to the light. To them, the sky was a black abyss. But there were moments. There were moments when they stepped into the shadow of the lunar module. Moments when they blocked the sun with their gloved hands. Moments when they allowed their eyes to dilate, to open up, to drink in the dark. And in those quiet moments, the stars returned. They described them as a sheet of light. A three-dimensional depth of stars that didn't just twinkle, but burned with steady, unmoving resolve. Without an atmosphere to blur them, the stars didn't shimmer. They were hard, colored points of light, red, blue, gold, piercing the blackness. They saw the Milky Way, not as a faint smear, but as a structured, luminous river of marble and milk, cutting through the geometry of the heavens. But they could not photograph it. The camera was locked to the settings of the day. The film was deaf to the frequency of the night. There is a profound beauty in this limitation. It reminds us that a photograph is not reality. It is a slice of reality. It is a choice. The astronauts chose to capture the human moment, the footprint, the salute, the smile behind the visor. In doing so, they had to let the universe fade into the background. The black sky in those photos is not empty. It is heavy. It is heavy with the presence of billions of galaxies that are simply waiting for their turn to be seen. It is a latent image, a hidden truth. If you were to stand there today and hold up your hand to block the sun and wait for your eyes to adjust, the darkness would come alive. The black curtain would dissolve, revealing the infinite depth behind it. You would see that you are not standing in a dark room. You are standing on the edge of a galaxy that is spiraling through the dark. So when you see those pictures, the lonely hero standing against the matte black void, do not feel suspicion. Feel the scale. Feel the brightness of the sun that forces the universe to hide. The stars are there. They are watching. They are the silent audience in the darkened theater, invisible because the spotlight is shining so brightly on the actors on the stage. They are waiting for the lights to go down. They are waiting for the sunset that on the moon comes only once every 2 weeks. Let the concept of that black sky settle over you. A sky that is deep and thick and full of secrets. A sky that protects its wonders from the harshness of the light. We are small. The light is bright, but the dark is vast. Rest in the knowledge that even when you cannot see them, the stars are always there. Chapter 6. The Ocean of Radiation. We have ascended through the atmosphere. We have watched the Earth shrink into a blue marble. We have adjusted our eyes to the stark, unfiltered sunlight of the vacuum. But now we must turn our attention to the invisible. Between the safe harbor of the Earth and the gray shores of the moon, there lies a vast, unseen ocean. It is not an ocean of water, but an ocean of energy. It is a place where the laws of the gentle earth do not apply, a region that has sparked fear and doubt in the minds of those who look up at the night sky. This is the domain of the Van Allen belts. To understand this ocean, we must first visualize the earth not as a rock, but as a magnet. Deep beneath our feet, thousands of miles down, the molten iron core of our planet is churning. It spins and flows, generating a colossal magnetic field that erupts from the South Pole, arcs high into space, and dives back down into the North Pole. It forms a cage, a protective cocoon that shields us from the violent winds of the sun. But this cage has a cost. As the solar wind, that relentless stream of charged particles blown out by the sun, strikes our magnetic field, it gets trapped. High-energy protons and electrons are caught in the invisible net, spiraling endlessly along the magnetic lines. They accumulate there, forming two distinct donuts of radiation that ring the planet. These are the Van Allen belts, shimmering, silent rivers of trapped fire. And to get to the moon, the Apollo astronauts had to sail right through them. It is here that the skeptic pauses. How, the question asks, could fragile human bodies survive such a journey? We are creatures of water and carbon, soft and easily damaged. Surely, passing through this storm of radiation would be lethal. Surely, the film in the cameras would be fogged and ruined, turned black by the invisible hail of particles. The fear is understandable. Radiation is a ghost. It is a danger we cannot see, taste, or feel until it is too late. But let us look at the voyage with the calm eyes of a physicist. The danger of radiation is not just about where you are, it is about time. Imagine a candle burning on a table in a quiet room. The flame is hot. It is dangerous. If you were to hold your hand directly inside the flame and keep it there, you would be burned. The damage would be severe. But now imagine you pass your finger through the flame. Quickly, smoothly, in the blink of an eye, what happens? You feel a momentary warmth, a fleeting sensation of heat, but your skin is unharmed. You have survived the fire not because the fire wasn't hot, but because you didn't stay long enough for the energy to transfer. The Apollo spacecraft, that silver needle threading the dark, was the finger passing through the flame. The spacecraft was moving at incredible speed, nearly 25,000 miles per hour. It did not linger in the belts. It pierced them. It spent only a handful of minutes in the most intense regions of the inner belt, and a few hours in the diffuse outer belt. It was a sprint through the danger zone, and the path was chosen with care. The engineers, the navigators who plotted the course with slide rules and stars, did not aim for the thickest part of the belts. They aimed for the edges. They threaded the needle, bypassing the dense hearts of the radiation zones, skimming the surface where the particles were thinner. The ship itself was a shield. The walls of the command module were made of aluminum, steel, and heat-shielding resin. While not thick enough to stop everything, this skin absorbed and scattered much of the radiation, dampening the storm before it could reach the men inside. And what of the men? They wore dosimeters, small, silent badges pinned to their chests, keeping a chemical tally of every particle that struck them. When they returned to Earth, the numbers were red. The average dose for a trip to the moon was not lethal. It was not even dangerous. It was roughly the same amount of radiation you might receive from a computed tomography scan, a CT scan, in a modern hospital. It was a dose, yes, but it was a dose the human body could absorb and repair. The ocean was deep, but they were in a submarine. Then there is the mystery of the film. Photographic film is sensitive. We know this. If you bring film through an airport X-ray machine, you risk fogging it. So why didn't the radiation of space turn the Apollo photos into gray, useless blur? The answer lies again in the details. The film was not sitting out on a shelf. It was rolled tightly inside metal magazines, heavy, aluminum canisters designed specifically for this journey. These canisters were the vaults. They provided their own layer of armor against the invisible rain, and the exposure was fast. Just as the ship moved quickly through the belts, the shutter of the camera snapped open and closed in a fraction of a second. The radiation was a background noise, a low hum, while the light from the sunlit moon was a symphony. The signal of the image overpowered the noise of the radiation. If you look very, very closely at the original negatives, under a microscope in a quiet archive, you can sometimes see tiny, random specks. Microscopic dots where a single cosmic ray struck the emulsion, but they are lost in the majesty of the landscape. The image survived, and so the ship passed through the fire. Once they cleared the belts, the noise of the magnetic field vanished. The sensors settled. The needle of the Geiger counter dropped. They entered the trans-lunar coast, the deep, quiet water between the worlds. This is the part of the journey we often forget. We remember the fire of the launch and the drama of the landing. But for 3 days there was only the drift. Imagine being in that capsule. The Earth is behind you, shrinking with every hour. The moon is ahead, growing larger, a gray ghost swelling in the window. The silence is absolute. There is no wind whistling past the hull. There is no engine vibration, for the engines are off. You are falling freely and endlessly towards your destination. The spaceship is slowly rotating, a barbecue roll, turning gently like a roast on a spit to distribute the heat of the sun. One moment, your window is filled with the blinding white fire of the star. The cabin is bathed in hard, brilliant light. Minutes later, the ship turns. The sun vanishes, and your window is filled with the eternal, crushing black of the deep void. Light, dark, a slow, hypnotic rhythm that marks the passage of time in a place where days and nights do not exist. The astronauts floated in this rhythm. They ate. They slept. They listened to music beamed up from Houston. They watched the radiation belts fade into memory, becoming just another invisible line they had crossed. The fear of the invisible ocean washed away, replaced by the awe of the distance. They were further from home than any human had ever been. They were solitary travelers in a vast, empty cathedral, and the silence of that cathedral was not threatening. It was peaceful. It was the silence of a universe that has been waiting for us. So let the worry about the radiation fade. Let the particles disperse into the vacuum. See the ship as it truly was, a small, warm bubble of life, protected by speed and metal, drifting safely across the Great Divide. Drifting, floating, moving towards the gray light. You are safe here. The storm is behind you. The water is calm, and ahead the moon is waiting. Chapter 7. The Testimony of the Regolith. We have navigated the fire of the launch, the silence of the coast, and the invisible storms of the radiation belts. We have landed. We are standing once again on the Sea of Tranquility, surrounded by the high-contrast theater of the lunar day. But now, I want you to look down. Past the gold foil of the lander, past the white fabric of the space suits, down to the very bottom of the frame. There, beneath the tread of the boots, lies the most significant witness of the entire journey. It is not a person. It is not a camera. It is the dust itself, the regolith. To the naked eye, looking through the thick glass of a helmet visor, it appears to be nothing more than gray dirt, a charcoal powder that clings to everything it touches. But if we were to take a pinch of this dust and place it under a microscope back on Earth, as thousands of geologists have done, we would see something terrifyingly beautiful. On Earth, sand is soft. If you pick up a handful of sand from a beach and let it slip through your fingers, it feels smooth. It flows. That is because, for millions of years, the wind and the waves have tumbled those grains. They have rubbed against each other, smoothing out the rough edges, turning jagged shards into polished, microscopic spheres. The Earth is a polisher. Its atmosphere and its oceans are constantly sanding down the sharp corners of the world. But the moon has no wind. It has no water. It has no atmosphere to soften the blow of time. The grains of the regolith are not spheres. They are shards. They are jagged, twisted hooks of glass and mineral. They are as sharp today as they were the moment they were shattered from the bedrock 3 billion years ago. They are interlocking, abrasive, and utterly alien. This is why the dust clung so aggressively to the astronauts' suits. It didn't just sit on the fabric. It hooked into it like microscopic Velcro. When the astronauts returned to the lunar module and took off their helmets, they smelled the dust. They described it as smelling like spent gunpowder, a sharp, metallic scent of ancient, pulverized stone that had never known the softening touch of oxygen. This sharpness is the first signature of reality. To forge this dust, to manufacture tons of material that has never been touched by wind or water, would require a process we do not possess. We cannot unweather a rock. We cannot ask the Earth to stop being the Earth. But the dust holds a deeper secret, a secret written in the violence of the vacuum. The moon has no shield, is defenseless against the cosmos. For eons, it has been bombarded not just by large asteroids, but by micrometeoroids. Tiny specks of dust, smaller than a grain of sand, traveling at 20,000 miles per hour. When these tiny bullets strike the lunar rocks, they do not just chip them, they melt them. The energy of the impact is so high and so focused that it instantly liquefies the rock at the point of contact, creating a microscopic crater lined with glass. These are called zap pits. Imagine a rock the size of a grapefruit. Under magnification, its surface is covered in these tiny, glass-lined wounds, pits within pits, a fractal history of bombardment. And inside these pits, we find tiny spheres of glass, orange, green, and black beads, created by the flash melting of the stone. These zap pits are the fingerprints of space. They can only form in a vacuum, under the rain of high-velocity particles. You cannot recreate them in a kiln. You cannot chisel them by hand. They are the slow accumulation of billions of years of exposure to the raw universe. To fake a single moon rock, you would need a particle accelerator capable of firing billions of microscopic grains of sand at hypersonic speeds, one by one, for centuries. And you would have to do it to 842 pounds of rock. That is the weight of the treasure brought back by the Apollo missions. 842 pounds. Imagine that volume. Crates and crates of basalt, breccia, and soil. It was not hidden away in a secret government vault. It was divided. It was cut into samples and shipped to laboratories in England, Japan, Russia, Australia. It was given to museums. It was gifted to heads of state. Thousands of geologists, many of whom had no allegiance to the United States, examined these stones. They looked for the telltale signs of Earth, the hydration minerals that form in the presence of water, the oxidation that forms in the presence of air. They found nothing. The rocks are dry, not dry like a desert, for even a desert rock holds microscopic traces of moisture deep within its crystal lattice. They are dry as a bone bleached by a supernova. They are chemically depleted of volatiles, elements like sodium and potassium that boil away easily in a vacuum. They contain isotopes, variants of elements like oxygen and argon, in ratios that are distinct from anything found on Earth. They carry the chemical signature of a world that formed in a different part of the solar nebula, a world that cooled in a different way. There is a specific rock, known as the Genesis rock, brought back by Apollo 15. It is a piece of anorthosite, a white, crystalline crust that is over 4 billion years old. It is nearly as old as the solar system itself. To hold it is to hold a piece of the original crust of the planetary body, preserved in pristine condition because there was no rain to dissolve it, no tectonic plates to crush it. On Earth, rocks that old have been recycled. They have been melted down, eroded, and reformed. The Earth is a recycler, it eats its own history, but the Moon is a museum, it keeps everything. If the landing were a hoax, the conspirators would have had to manufacture a geology that does not exist. They would have had to invent a new branch of chemistry. They would have had to create minerals that had never been seen before, and then plant them inside rocks that looked perfectly natural. And they would have had to fool the entire scientific community of the world, including their rivals in the Soviet Union, who had their own robotically retrieved moon soil to compare it with. The complexity of the lie becomes heavier than the rocks themselves. So, when you think of the moon landing, do not just think of the flag or the footprint. Think of the dust. Think of the sheer, jagged hostility of those tiny grains. Think of the silence of the laboratory late at night, where a geologist peers through a lens and sees the glassy scars of a micrometeoroid that struck that stone when dinosaurs were walking the Earth. The regolith is a witness that cannot be bribed. It cannot be coached. It has no political agenda. It simply sits there, gray and glittering, holding the history of the solar system in its rough, sharp hands. It tells us that we went. It tells us that we walked on a world that is truly, profoundly different from our own. A world where the wind never blows and the stones never sleep. Rest in the certainty of the physical world. The atoms do not lie. The rocks do not pretend. They are the anchors of reality in a drifting sea of doubt. You can sleep now knowing that the ground is solid, the evidence is heavy, and the truth is as tangible as a stone in your hand. Chapter 8. The retroreflectors. The footprints we left are silent. The flag is still. The dust has settled. But there is something else we left behind on the Sea of Tranquility and on the Fra Mauro Highlands and near the Rill of Hadley. It is not a monument. It is not a plaque. It is something far more functional and in its own way far more beautiful. Resting on the gray dust, sitting on small aluminum legs, is a panel. It is about the size of a suitcase. It looks like a tray of diamonds waiting to be served to a ghost. These are the laser-ranging retroreflectors. They are perhaps the most elegant objects humanity has ever crafted. They have no moving parts. They have no batteries. They have no wires. They are simply arrays of silica glass prisms, cut with a geometry so perfect that they defy the chaos of the lunar surface. They are mirrors, but not the kind of mirrors you look into every morning. Those are flat. They bounce light away at an angle. If you shine a flashlight at a bathroom mirror, the beam bounces off to the wall. The mirrors on the moon are corner-cubed reflectors. Imagine the corner of a room where three walls meet. If you were to throw a ball into that corner, it would bounce off one wall, then the second, then the third, and come flying back precisely towards your hand. It does not matter where you stand. It does not matter the angle of the throw. The corner always returns the gift. These prisms do the same with light. They are designed to catch a beam of light coming from Earth and send it back, parallel to the source, across 250,000 miles of void. And right now, as you drift towards sleep, this exchange is happening. Let us leave the moon for a moment and return to Earth, but not to the cities or the noise. Let us go to the high, thin air of a mountain peak. Maybe it is the McDonald Observatory in Texas. Maybe it is the Observatoire de la Côte d'Azur in France, or the dizzying heights of Mauna Kea in Hawaii. The dome of the observatory is open to the night. The air is cold and still. Inside, a massive telescope slews silently on gears of oil, tracking the slow arc of the moon. Attached to this telescope is a laser. It fires. A pulse of concentrated green light shoots out of the cannon. It pierces the atmosphere, a spear of emerald energy stabbing into the dark. It travels at the speed limit of the universe, 186,000 miles per second. Follow that pulse in your mind. It leaves the atmosphere. It enters the silence. It crosses the great black ocean. As it travels, the beam spreads out. It diffuses. By the time it reaches the moon, that tight beam of light has widened into a circle miles across. It washes over the landing site. Most of the light hits the dark soil and is absorbed. Most of it hits the rocks and is scattered into the void. But a tiny fraction, a microscopic portion of that light, finds the suitcase of diamonds. It strikes the silica prisms. It bounces, wall, and instantly it turns around. It begins the long journey home. The return beam is faint. It is a whisper of light. By the time it travels all the way back to Earth, spreading out once again, it is almost nothing. The telescope on the mountain is waiting. It is listening with a single photon avalanche diode, an electronic ear so sensitive it can hear the footstep of a ghost. It waits. 1 second, 2 seconds, and then, ping, it catches them. Not a beam, but individual particles of light. Sometimes only 1 photon, sometimes 5. A handful of travelers that have touched the moon and returned to tell the tale. And because we know the speed of light with absolute certainty, we can measure the time of that journey. We can look at the clock, a clock that counts in trillionths of a second, and say, the moon is exactly 384,400 kilometers and 2 millimeters away. At 2 millimeters, we can measure the distance to another world with the precision of a sheet of paper. This experiment has been running for 50 years. It is the heartbeat of the Apollo program. It is the long experiment. And it is the ultimate, silent rebuttal to the doubt. If we never went to the moon, If the landings were a fabrication on a soundstage in Nevada, then how did the mirrors get there? You cannot bounce a laser off a rock. The lunar soil is dark. It scatters light in every direction like a dusty road. If you shoot a laser at the bare ground of the moon, you get nothing back. The silence is absolute. You need the prisms. You need the corner cubes, manufactured by human hands, placed with precise orientation, facing the Earth. And you do not need to trust NASA to verify this. You do not need to trust the American government. You only need a laser and a telescope. The Russians verified it. They fired their own lasers from the Crimean Astrophysical Observatory. They found the mirrors. They used them. The French verify it every night. The Chinese, the Japanese, the Italians. Any astronomer with the right equipment can reach out and touch the landing sites. They are public domain. They are open to anyone who knows the coordinates. It is a test that is repeated every single day. A continuous, unbroken chain of evidence made of light. Think of the implications of this. It means that right now, there is an invisible thread connecting our world to the sea of tranquility. A thread of green light that pulses back and forth, sewing the Earth and the Moon together. It connects us to the work of the astronauts. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin placed that panel on the dust, they were adjusting it, checking the bubble level, making sure it was flat. They were setting up a beacon for the future. They knew they would leave. They knew the footprints would sit unobserved. They knew the flag would freeze. But they knew the mirror would speak. It speaks of a universe that is rational. A universe where light obeys laws. A universe where we can measure our place with staggering accuracy. Because of these mirrors, we know that the moon is drifting away from us. We know that the liquid core of the moon is fluid. We know the subtle wobbles of its rotation. We know these things because we are still touching it. The Apollo missions ended in 1972. The rockets stopped flying. The crowds went home. The noise faded, but the light never stopped. Imagine standing next to that reflector on the moon right now. You are alone in the vacuum. The Earth is a blue marble overhead. The ground is silent. And then, suddenly, the panel flares. A flash of green light, brilliant and sharp, erupts from the glass. It blinks at you, a signal from the blue marble. And then the glass goes dark again, waiting for the next pulse. It is a lighthouse that only shines when you shine a light at it. It is a promise that we are still here and it is still there. So as you lie in the dark, visualize that beam. A pulse of pure energy leaving the Earth, climbing through the clouds, sailing through the silence, touching the dust, turning around. And coming home, it is a hypnotic rhythm, out and back like the tide, like your breath. Breathe in as the light leaves. Breathe out as the light returns. In, out, we are connected. We are tethered to the heavens by a line of light that cannot be broken, cannot be faked, and cannot be denied. The mirrors are waiting. They will be waiting 1,000 years from now. Silent, patient, and perfect. Reflecting our curiosity back to us, one photon at a time. The connection is made. The distance is measured. The truth is a beam of light in the dark. Chapter 9. The Web of Logistics. We have spent much of our journey tonight looking up. We have stood on the gray dust of the sea of tranquility. We have floated in the silence of the void. We have traced the path of lasers and light. But now, we must return to the ground. We must return to the atmosphere, to the gravity, and to the complex, messy, beautiful world of human endeavor. To understand the reality of the moon landing, we cannot just look at the 3 men who went. We must look at the thousands who stayed behind. We must look at the web. Imagine a map of the United States spread out before you in the dark. It is night. The cities are glowing clusters of amber light connected by the thin, white veins of highways. Now imagine lighting up every single factory, every laboratory, every university, and every workshop that contributed a piece to the Apollo program. The map explodes with light. It is not just a dot in Florida and a dot in Houston. It is a constellation that spans the entire continent. From the textile mills of Massachusetts to the aerospace hangars of California, from the computing centers of New York to the engine test stands of Mississippi. This was not a secret project huddled in a dark room. It was a national mobilization. The number is staggering: 400,000 people. 400,000. That is the population of a mid-sized city. It is a workforce larger than the armies of most nations. And for a decade, all of these minds were turned toward a singular point in the sky. The skeptic asks, could they have kept it a secret? The theory suggests that the landing was faked, that it was a production. But to fake an event of this magnitude, you do not just need actors and cameras. You need silence. You need a silence so profound, so absolute, that it defies the very nature of humanity. Let us look at the logistics of a live versus the logistics of a launch. If the rockets were empty shells, if the landers were props, if the computers were just blinking lights, then who built them? Someone had to weld the aluminum. Someone had to wire the circuits. Someone had to stitch the fabric. Consider the seamstresses. The spacesuits worn by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were not made of hard metal. They were soft ships. They were 21 layers of neoprene, nylon, and captain, stitched together with a precision that measured in millimeters. They were made by the International Latex Corporation, a company best known for making brassieres and girdles. The women who sewed these suits were experts in fabric, not physics. They worked with their hands, guiding the needles through the complex layers, knowing that a single dropped stitch, a single loose thread, would mean the death of the man inside. They didn't use blueprints, they used patterns. They worked long hours, their eyes tired, their fingers sore. They knew the astronauts by name. They knew their measurements. They tailored the suits to fit the specific hunch of a shoulder or the length of an arm. If the landing was a fake, did these women know? Were they told to sew a costume? Or were they tricked? To trick an expert is difficult. A seamstress knows the difference between a costume and a pressure vessel. She knows how fabric behaves under tension. She knows that a zipper meant to hold air against the vacuum of space feels different, heavier, stiffer, than a zipper meant for a movie set. These women were proud. They watched the launch knowing that their handiwork was the only thing standing between a human being and the lethal nothingness. To ask them to keep a secret, to tell them 50 years later that their work was a sham, is to misunderstand the deep, personal connection between a maker and their creation. Now, move from the sewing room to the welding floor. The fuel tanks of the Saturn V were massive domes of aluminum alloy. They had to be welded together with a technique so perfect that not a single bubble of air could be trapped in the metal seams. The men and women who did this welding were not actors. They were craftsmen. They spent years perfecting their technique. They developed new alloys. They invented new tools. If the rocket was a prop, why did they build it to flight specifications? Why did they X-ray every weld? Why did they pressure test every tank until it groaned under the strain? To build a fake rocket that looks real on the outside but is empty on the inside is one thing. But to build a fake rocket that is real on the inside, with functioning pumps, real fuel lines, real guidance computers, is simply building a rocket. At a certain point, the effort required to fake the technology becomes greater than the effort required to actually create it. And then there is the paper. We often forget that Apollo was an analog project. There were no PDFs. There were no emails. Everything was written down. The documentation for the Apollo program is a physical weight that rivals the spacecraft itself. There are millions of pages of schematics. There are flight manuals thick as encyclopedias. There are quality control forms, purchase orders, test results, meeting minutes, and memos. If you were to stack the blueprints for the Saturn V, the pile would tower over the rocket itself. Every single bolt, and there were millions of them, had a paper trail. It had a manufacturer, a batch number, a test date, and a signature of the inspector who approved it. If this was a conspiracy, it was a conspiracy of bureaucracy. It would require thousands of people to sit in offices for a decade, generating fake paperwork for fake parts, filing fake reports, and holding fake meetings to discuss fake problems. It is the nature of secrets that they decay. A secret held by one person is safe. A secret held by two is fragile. A secret held by 400,000 is impossible. Human beings are not good at silence. We are storytellers. We talk to our spouses over dinner. We boast to our friends at the bar. We write diaries. We confess on our deathbeds. In the 50 years since the landing, not a single person from that vast army of workers has come forward with proof of a hoax. Not one engineer has produced a memo saying, "Don't worry about the engine, it doesn't need to work." Not one cameraman has released a photo of the studio set. Instead, we have the opposite. We have the stories of the struggle. We have the memoirs of the engineers who stayed up for 3 days, straight trying to fix a leaking valve. We have the grief of the teams who lost their friends in the Apollo 1 fire. We have the pride of the grandfather showing his grandchild a bolt in a museum and saying, "I made that." This is the web of logistics. It is a net of human memory that is too tight for a lie to slip through. The conspiracy theory asks us to believe in a monolithic, shadowy government capable of perfect control. But the reality of Apollo was not monolithic. It was messy. It was a collection of subcontractors, private companies, and universities, all arguing, collaborating, and competing. To orchestrate a lie across such a diverse and chaotic group would require a competence that no government in history has ever demonstrated. It is often said that the government is bad at two things: doing things and keeping secrets. Apollo required them to do the hardest thing imaginable in the most public way possible. The visibility was the proof. The parts were not teleported to Florida. They moved on trains. They moved on barges down the Mississippi River. They moved on massive, slow-crawling transporters that stopped traffic in small towns. People came out to their porches to watch the segments of the rocket pass by. They saw the tangible reality of the hardware. They felt the ground shake as the trucks rolled past. This was not a digital event. It was an event of steel and rubber and sweat. So, as you drift deeper into relaxation, visualize that web. See the threads of light connecting the map. See the seamstress in Delaware, carefully guiding the nylon under the needle. See the welder in Louisiana, lowering his mask to check a seam. See the mathematician in Massachusetts, scribbling equations on a chalkboard covered in chalk dust. See them not as conspirators, but as people. People like you. People who woke up early, drank their coffee, and went to work with a sense of purpose that we can barely imagine today. They were part of a great collective lifting, a moment where humanity decided to act as one organism. The silence of the moon is beautiful, but the noise of the effort, the hum of the factories, the scratch of the pens, the roar of the trucks, is equally profound. It reminds us that great things are not done by magic. They are done by the accumulation of small, ordinary actions. One stitch, one weld, one calculation, one bolt, 400,000 minds, one destination. Rest in the knowledge that the truth is woven into the very fabric of our history. It is stitched into the suits. It is welded into the tanks. It is filed away in the cabinets of archives. It is safe. It is real, and it was built by hands just like ours. Chapter 10. The Soviet Watchers. The web of logistics we just explored was a map of light spread across the American continent. It was a hive of activity, a chorus of 400,000 voices shouting towards the sky. But half a world away, under a different constellation of stars, there was another map. And on this map, the lights were dimmer, but the eyes were just as sharp. To understand the full weight of the moon landing, to truly feel the solidity of the event, we must travel to the other side of the mirror. We must go to the lands of the Soviet Union, to the Crimean Peninsula, to the deep, snowy forests where the radio antennas stood like iron skeletons against the cold sky. This was the era of the Cold War, a time when the world was held in a delicate, terrifying balance between two titans. It was a chess game played on a global board, where every move was watched, measured, and countered. The race to the moon was not a friendly sporting event. It was the ultimate demonstration of power. It was a race to claim the high ground of the future. For a decade, the Soviet Union had led this race. They had put the first satellite, Sputnik, into the dark. They had put the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into the void. They were the masters of the first steps. But as Apollo 11 lifted off from Florida, the masters became the audience. And they were not an audience that would be easily fooled. Imagine, if you will, a control room in a secret facility near Yevpatoria, on the shores of the Black Sea. The air is thick with the smell of ozone and heavy tobacco smoke. The room is filled with technicians, engineers, and military officers. They are not cheering, they are working. They are the Soviet watchers. Their job was not to trust. Their job was to verify. Their job was to find the flaw. If the Americans were faking this, if the rocket was empty, if the signal was coming from a studio in Hollywood, if there was any deception at all, these men were poised to expose it. They had the motivation. To catch the Americans in a lie would have been the greatest victory of the Cold War. It would have shattered the credibility of their rival for a century. They would have broadcast the proof to every television set on Earth. So they listened. They pointed their massive radio telescopes, great white bowls of steel, 32 meters wide, towards the moon. They tuned their receivers to the specific frequencies used by Apollo. And what did they hear? They did not hear silence. They did not hear a recording played from a tape deck. They heard the telemetry, the raw, pulsing heartbeat of the spacecraft systems. They heard the voice of Neil Armstrong, crackling through the static, traveling at the speed of light across the void. But more importantly, they knew where the voice was coming from. Radio waves are like beams of light. They travel in straight lines. To hear a signal, you must point your ear directly at the source. If the signal were coming from a transmitter in the Nevada desert, the Soviet telescopes would have had to point through the Earth, towards the American West. If the signal were coming from a satellite in low Earth orbit, the telescopes would have had to track it quickly across the sky, moving from horizon to horizon in minutes. But the telescopes did not look down. They did not look sideways. They looked up. They tracked a single, slow-moving point in the heavens. They followed the moon. As the Earth turned, the great gears of the telescopes groaned, tilting the dishes to keep them locked on that silver lantern. The physics of the signal was undeniable. The delay was there. The 1-3 seconds it takes for radio waves to cross the gap. The Doppler shift was there. The slight change in pitch caused by the speed of the spacecraft moving away from the Earth. The Soviet engineers watched their oscilloscopes. They saw the green lines dancing in time with the American voices. They looked at the data. They looked at each other. And in the quiet of that smoke-filled room, they realized the truth. They were not watching a magic trick. They were watching a defeat. But it was a defeat so magnificent, so technically perfect, that it demanded respect. There is a story that is often forgotten in the history books, a story of a telegram. When the Eagle touched down on the Sea of Tranquility, and the first boots disturbed the gray dust, the news did not just travel to American living rooms. It traveled to the Kremlin. And the Soviet government, the rival, the adversary, the watcher, sent a telegram to Washington. It was not a message of anger. It was not a message of accusation. It was a message of congratulations. The flight of Apollo 11, it read, is a significant step in the exploration of space. It was brief, it was formal, but in the language of diplomacy, it was an admission of reality. The Soviet Union, with all its spies, all its radar, all its desire to win, had looked at the evidence and bowed its head. If there had been a fake, they would have screamed it from the rooftops. They would have presented the radar logs showing the empty sky. They would have played the tapes of the signals coming from the wrong direction. But they didn't, because they couldn't. The silence of the Soviet Union is the loudest proof we have. It is a verification born of envy, checked by physics, and sealed by pride. Imagine the scene in that control room as the mission ended. The technicians turning off the equipment, the hum of the cooling fans dying down, the lights of the oscilloscopes fading to black. They stepped out into the cool night air of the Crimea. They looked up at the moon, hanging over the Black Sea. They knew, with a certainty that no one else could possess, that there were men up there. They knew because they had tracked them every inch of the way. They had been the shadow companions of the voyage, the silent witnesses who validated the feat simply by failing to disprove it. There is a peace in this realization. It means that truth is not a matter of belief. It is a matter of measurement. It exists independently of politics. It exists independently of borders. The radio waves that carried Neil Armstrong's voice did not care about the Iron Curtain. They washed over the entire planet, falling on the antennas of friends and foes alike. They were a universal rain of information, and in that rain, the divisions of the world washed away for a moment. There were no Soviets, no Americans. There were only humans standing on one rock, listening to the voices of humans standing on another rock. So, as you drift deeper into the comfort of sleep, let go of the conflict. Let go of the tension of the race. Visualize those great white dishes in the Russian forest, slowly tilting back to their resting positions. Their job is done. The sky is quiet. The watchers have gone to sleep. They have accepted the reality of the night. And in their acceptance, they have given us a gift, the gift of certainty. We went. The rivals watched. And the moon kept shining, indifferent to it all, holding the secrets of our unity in its silent, cratered hands. Chapter 11. The Human Signal. We have listened to the silence of the rocks. We have measured the distance with lasers. We have traced the wires of the machines and watched the radar screens of the rivals. But there is one final witness we must examine. It is not made of metal or glass. It is made of flesh and bone. It is the human signal. Amidst the grand geometry of the solar system, amidst the terrifying vacuum and the blinding sun, there were men. Not gods, not actors, but men. Fathers, husbands, pilots who were tired, excited, clumsy, and profoundly alive. To understand the truth of the moon landing, we must look past the hardware and look at the behavior of the life inside it. The first signal of their distance is the pause. If you listen to the raw audio tapes of the mission, not the edited clips on the news, but the long, unpolished recordings, you will hear a rhythm that is impossible to fake in a conversation on Earth. Houston speaks, Eagle, we copy you down. And then silence, 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Roger, tranquility, we are on the ground. This gap is the light delay. Radio waves travel at 186,000 miles per second. It takes 1.3 seconds for a voice to leave Earth and touch the moon. It takes another 1.3 seconds for the answer to return. In a studio, this delay would feel artificial. Actors would naturally want to close the gap to keep the scene flowing. But in the recordings, the delay is a physical wall. It is a constant, rhythmic reminder of the chasm between the speakers. It is the sound of distance itself. But let us look at the movement. The way a human being moves on Earth is dictated by gravity. We are heavy. Our muscles are tuned to fight against the pull of the planet with every step. On the moon, the gravity is 1/6 of what we know. A 200-pound man weighs only 33 pounds. Skeptics have argued that the footage was slowed down, that the astronauts were on wires, suspended from a ceiling to simulate flotation. But look closely at the bunny hop. This was the gait the astronauts naturally adopted, a loping, 2-footed jump. If you put a man on wires and ask him to jump, his center of gravity moves in a specific way. The harness pulls him up. His hips swing unnaturally. But on the moon, the astronauts push from their toes. Their center of gravity follows a perfect, smooth parabola that physics dictates. You can slow down film, but you cannot slow down gravity. If you take a film of a man jumping on Earth and play it in slow motion, he stays in the air longer, yes, but his arms also move slower. His head turns slower. The dust he kicks up moves slower. In the Apollo footage, the astronauts are floating through the air in slow motion, but their arms are moving at normal speed. They are waving, checking their watches, grabbing tools with the quick, jerky motions of real time, even while their bodies are suspended in a long, lazy arc. To fake this, to have the body move at one speed and the limbs at another, is impossible with a camera speed trick. It is the signature of a world where mass and weight have been divorced. And then there is the dust. I want you to visualize a car driving down a dirt road on Earth. What happens? A cloud of dust billows up behind it. It hangs in the air. It swirls. The air turbulence grabs the tiny particles and holds them, creating a fog that slowly drifts away. Now watch the tires of the lunar rover, or the boots of the astronauts. When they kick up the gray soil, it does not cloud. It does not billow. Each individual grain of sand flies upward, follows a perfect, sharp arc and falls back to the ground instantly. There is no air to catch it. There is no turbulence to swirl it. The dust behaves like a spray of lead shot. It is heavy, fast, and precise. It creates a rooster tail of geometric perfection. To simulate this on Earth, you would have to remove all the air from the studio. You would have to create a vacuum chamber the size of a football field. Even today, with all our technology, we cannot do that. The dust is the ultimate truth teller. It moves in a way that nothing on Earth moves. It falls with the swift, silent certainty of a stone in a void. But beyond the physics, there is the psychology. If this were a movie, it would be dramatic. There would be speeches. There would be constant tension, but the reality of the moon landings was often boring. There were hours and hours of mundane work. The astronauts were geologists and mechanics. They spent time reading checklists. They spent time struggling to unscrew a stuck bolt. They complained about their backaches. They hummed songs. There is a moment where an astronaut trips. He falls slowly, clumsily into the dust. He doesn't panic, he laughs. He struggles to get up like a turtle on its shell, pushing against the ground, flailing his legs. It is unrehearsed. It is messy. It is the clumsy ballet of tired men working in stiff, pressurized suits. And they slept. Imagine that. They traveled all that way to the most dangerous environment known to man, and they curled up in hammocks slung across the tiny cabin of the lander. They closed their eyes. They drifted off, while the Earth hung in the window above them. This is the human signal, the capacity to normalize the extraordinary, the ability to find routine on the edge of the abyss. And finally, there is the change. When the astronauts came back, they were different. They didn't speak like actors who had finished a role. They spoke like men who had seen something that broke their understanding of the world. They spoke of the overview effect. That standing on the gray surface, seeing the Earth not as a map but as a small, fragile marble of blue and white, surrounded by the infinite black. It changed them. They saw the thinness of the atmosphere, that delicate shell that protects all life. They saw the lack of borders. They saw the unity of the planet. Neil Armstrong, a man of few words, a stoic engineer, looked back at the Earth and felt a profound, quiet diminishment of his own ego. He realized that everything he ever loved, every history book, every war, every song, was contained on that tiny blue sphere. You cannot fake that look in a man's eyes. The look of someone who has looked into the void and found it not empty, but full of a terrible, silent beauty. So, as you lie here, safe in the gravity of Earth, feel the weight of your own body. Feel the blanket pressing down on you. That is the hug of the planet. Imagine for a moment that weight lifting. Imagine hopping, light as a feather, across a silent gray desert. Imagine kicking up dust that falls like rain. Imagine looking up and seeing your home small enough to cover with your thumb. The human signal is faint, but it is clear. It is the signal of curiosity. It is the signal of fragility. We went, we stumbled, we worked, we slept. And we came home, forever changed by the view from the silent lantern. Chapter 12. Eyes from Above. The voices of the astronauts have long since faded from the radio waves. The static has cleared. The telegrams have been filed away in the dusty cabinets of history. For decades, the landing sites sat in silence. They were invisible to us. The telescopes on Earth, even the mighty Hubble, could not resolve them. The moon is too far and the landers are too small, tiny specks of gold and silver lost in a sea of gray. So, for 40 years, the proof remained in the realm of memory. It existed in the photographs taken by the men who were there and in the rocks they brought home. But we are a species that needs to see. We need to look down. And so, in the year 2009, we sent a new traveler to the moon. It carried no crew. It needed no air. It was a robotic sentinel built of titanium and glass, designed with a single purpose: to map the world beneath it with a clarity we had never possessed before. This is the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, the LRO. Imagine a silver bird flying low, not high in the black void, but skimming just 30 miles above the lunar peaks. It moves at 3,600 miles per hour, a silent surveyor circling the globe again and again, stripping away the secrets of the shadows. Its camera is not like the one Neil Armstrong carried. It is a telescope looking down. It is a machine of staggering precision, capable of spotting a coffee table on the surface from the height of an airplane. And as it began its mission, as it adjusted its lens and focused its gaze, it turned its attention to the Sea of Tranquility, to the Ocean of Storms, to the Fra Mauro Highlands. It looked for the lost ships, and it found them. I want you to visualize the images it sent back. They are not the grainy, high-contrast television broadcasts of the past. They are sharp. They are digital. They are undeniable. In the center of the frame, casting a long, hard shadow against the morning sun, sits a square object. It is metallic. It is geometric. It does not belong to the geology of the moon. It is the descent stage of the Eagle. Remember, when the astronauts left, they did not take the whole ship. They used the bottom half as a launch pad. They blasted off, leaving the four-legged spider of the lander behind. It is still there, sitting exactly where Neil Armstrong parked it on that Sunday in July. It has not moved an inch. The gold foil is still wrapped around its struts. The ladder is still attached to the leg. But the satellite sees more than just the machine. It sees the movement of the ghosts. Surrounding the lander, the ground is different. The pristine, white reflective surface of the moon has been disturbed. Where the boots of the astronauts churned up the soil, they uncovered the darker material beneath. From the height of orbit, these disturbances look like dark scribbles on a sheet of white paper. They are tracks. You can trace them. You can follow the dark, jagged line where Neil Armstrong walked over to the Little West crater to look inside. You can see the path where Buzz Aldrin set up the solar wind experiment. You can see the desire lines of their work, moving back and forth between the ship and the instruments. These are not vague smudges. They are specific. They match, foot for foot, the video footage taken from the surface. If you watch the old video, you see an astronaut run to the left. If you look at the new satellite image, you see a dark trail going to the left. It is a perfect overlay, a map drawn by feet, verified by a robot in the sky. And it is not just Apollo 11. At the Apollo 14 site, you can see the tracks of the rickshaw, the small two-wheeled cart the astronauts dragged behind them. You can see the two parallel lines of the wheels cutting through the dust, winding their way up the slope of Cone Crater. At the Apollo 15, 16, and 17 sites, the view becomes even more expansive. Here they had the lunar rover, the moon buggy. From 30 miles up, you can see the dual tracks of the tires. They loop and weave across the landscape like ribbons. You can trace their joyrides. You can see where they drove out miles to the base of the mountains. You can see where they turned sharply to avoid a rock. And you can see the rover itself, parked at the end of the tracks. A tiny rectangular dot, sitting alone in the vastness, waiting for a driver who will never return. There is a profound intimacy in these images. Usually when we look at space, We see stars or planets or nebulae, things that are massive and impersonal. But here, we are looking at the artifacts of a Tuesday afternoon. We are looking at the result of human labor. We are seeing the graffiti of exploration. And there is one final detail that the sharp eye of the orbiter reveals. A detail that is perhaps the most poignant of all: the flags. You cannot see the stars and stripes themselves. They are too thin to be resolved from space, but you can see their shadows. Depending on the time of the lunar day, as the sun moves across the sky, the shadows of the flagpoles stretch out across the ground. They move. They circle the pole like the hands of a clock. The LRO has spotted these shadows at almost every landing site. Apollo 12, 14, 15, 16, 17. The flags are still standing. The poles are still upright. But there is one exception. At the site of Apollo 11, the very first landing, there is no shadow. This confirms a story told by Buzz Aldrin. He reported that as they lifted off, as the ascent engine fired its rocket plume into the ground to push them back to orbit, he looked out the window and saw the flag blow over. It was too close to the ship. The violence of the departure knocked it down. The satellite confirms this. The shadow is gone. The pole is lying in the dust, buried under the exhaust of history. It is a detail that a faker would never have included. If you were staging a fake moon landing, you would leave the flag standing proud. You would not invent a story about knocking it over. But reality is messy. Physics is unforgiving. The engine fired and the flag fell. The satellite sees it all. Now I want you to consider the permanence of what we are seeing. On Earth, a footprint lasts until the next rain. A tire track lasts until the wind blows. A building lasts until the vines pull it down or the rust eats the beams. Earth is a planet of erasure. It is constantly wiping the chalkboard clean, preparing for the next lesson. But the moon is a planet of memory. There is no wind to sweep the dust over those tracks. There is no rain to wash them away. There is no oxidation to rust the gold foil. There are no bacteria to eat the fabric of the backpacks they threw out the hatch to save weight. The tracks you see in the LRO images are not just lingering. They are geological features. They will remain there, sharp and dark, for 10,000 years, for 1,000,000 years, for 10 million years. Unless a meteor strikes that exact spot, the footprints of Neil Armstrong will outlast the pyramids of Giza. They will outlast the skyscrapers of New York. They will outlast the ice caps. They are etched into the stone of the solar system. This concept transforms the landing sites into something else. They are not just abandoned campsites. They are museums. Imagine walking through a museum where the exhibits are not behind glass, but sitting out in the open, frozen in a vacuum. If you were to walk up to the Apollo 17 site today, you would see the rover exactly as Gene Cernan left it. The wheels turned slightly to the left. The high-gain antenna pointed at Earth. The fender they fixed with duct tape and a map, still held together by that gray tape. You would see the backpacks lying in the dust. You would see the bags of trash they tossed out. It would look as if they had just vanished 5 minutes ago. The scene is suspended in a state of eternal interruption. The orbiter allows us to visit this museum from a distance. It allows us to peer through the skylight and see that nothing has changed. The doubters say we never went, but the robot we sent to check says, here they are. Here is the path they took. Here is the car they drove. Here is the shadow of the ship. It is a quiet, indisputable verification from above. A view that separates the mythology from the geography. So, as you drift deeper into the night, imagine that silver bird circling the gray world. It passes over the silent machinery. It snaps a picture. It sends the data back to us on a beam of light. And in that picture, we see ourselves. We see the mark we made. A small, dark scratch on the face of eternity. It is a mark that says, we were here. We crossed the ocean. We walked on the shore. And then we went home, leaving the door open and the lights on. Chapter 13, The Sights Today. We have looked at the moon from the Earth. We have looked at it from the window of a spacecraft. We have looked at it through the lens of a satellite. But now, for this final stage of our journey before we drift into the cosmic scale, I want you to go there. Not in a ship, not in a suit, but in your mind. Let your consciousness drift away from the room you are in. Let it float up through the ceiling, through the clouds, across the black ocean of the night, until you are hovering over the sea of tranquility. Descend slowly, past the mountains that ring the basin, past the craters that scar the plains. Lower, lower, until your feet touch the dust. You are standing at Tranquility Base. The date is today. The time is right now. The first thing you notice is the silence. On Earth, silence is never truly silent. There is always the rustle of leaves, the hum of a refrigerator, the beating of your own heart. Even in the deepest cave, there is the sound of air moving. But here, the silence is a physical weight. It is a heavy, velvet blanket that wraps around the world. There is no air to carry sound. If a meteor were to strike the ground a mile away, you would see the flash. You would see the debris fly, but you would hear nothing. It is a stillness so profound that it feels like time itself has stopped. Look around you. The sky is jet black, filled with the unblinking stare of the stars. The sun is a spotlight that does not flicker. The shadows are sharp, black pools of ink that stretch across the gray ground. In front of you, the descent stage of the Eagle sits exactly where it was left. It is a golden octagon, gleaming in the harsh light. The gold foil, the captain insulation that protected the ship, is crinkled. It looks like wrapping paper left over from a gift opened long ago. It is fragile. On Earth, the wind would have torn it away decades ago. The rain would have peeled it off. The sun would have bleached the color. But here, it is pristine. It sparkles with the same amber brilliance it had when it left the factory in New York 50 years ago. Every wrinkle is preserved. Every fold is a sculpture of metal frozen in the vacuum. Walk closer. Beneath the engine bell, the ground is scorched. You can see the radial pattern where the rocket exhaust blew the dust away, revealing the harder rock underneath. It looks like a starburst painted on the soil, and near the leg of the lander, there is the ladder. The rungs are silver, shining against the shadow. This is the ladder down which humanity stepped, and at the base of the ladder, the footprint. Look at it closely. It is not a vague depression. It is a stamp. You can see the horizontal ridges of the boot sole. You can see the sharp definition of the heel. It looks wet. The dust of the moon has a cohesive quality, sticking together like damp cocoa powder. Because of this, the print holds its shape perfectly. It has been there for half a century. Think of everything that has happened on Earth in that time. Empires have risen and fallen. Cities have been built. Forests have grown and been cut down. Glaciers have melted. You were born, you grew up, you lived your life. And through all of that noise, through all of that chaotic motion, this footprint has sat here, unmoving, unchanging. It has sat here through the freezing nights. The lunar night lasts for 14 Earth days. When the sun sets, the temperature plummets. It drops to 280 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. It is a cold that shatters steel. The metal of the lander contracts. It groans in the silence, shrinking under the assault of the dark. And then the sun rises. For 14 days, it bakes the ground. The temperature soars to 260 degrees above 0. The metal expands. The gold foil shimmers in the heat. Hot, cold, expansion, contraction. A slow, rhythmic breathing of the materials, but the dust does not care. The footprint does not crack. It sits in its gray stasis, immune to the temperature, immune to the years. Wander further away from the ship. You see the television camera, still mounted on its tripod, its glass eye staring blindly at the landing site. It transmitted the most watched event in human history. Now it watches nothing. You see the solar wind collector, a sheet of foil like a window shade. You see the bags of trash, white canvas bags tossed out to save weight. They are sitting there, bright white boulders against the gray. They contain the mundane remnants of the journey, food wrappers, waste, tools. Even these discarded things have become sacred. They are artifacts of the presence of life in a lifeless place. There is a feeling here that is hard to describe. It is the feeling of an interrupted room. It is like walking into a house where the family has just left for vacation and the door has locked behind them. The coffee cup is still on the table, the book is still open, the chair is still pulled out, but the family has been gone for 50 years. The moon is a museum, but it is a museum with no visitors. There are no velvet ropes. There are no guards. There is only the vacuum. It is the museum of the first step. And it is perfect. If we had built a monument on Earth, a statue of Neil Armstrong in a park, it would have weathered. Birds would sit on it. Rain would stain it. Moss would grow in the cracks. We would have to scrub it and repair it. But the universe has preserved the real monument for us. It has placed it in a vacuum-sealed display case. It has sterilized it with radiation. It has frozen it with cold. It is keeping it safe. Imagine standing there next to the leg of the eagle. You reach out your hand, but you do not touch the gold. You just feel the radiation of history coming off it. You look up at the Earth. It is hanging directly overhead. It never moves in the lunar sky, because the moon is tidally locked, always showing the same face to Earth. The Earth hangs fixed in the sky, spinning slowly, changing phases, but never setting, never rising. It is a blue eye watching its own creation. You feel a sense of peace settle over you. The controversy, the arguments, the noise of the internet, it all feels very small from here. Here, there is only the object, the metal, the dust. The truth, it is a truth that does not need to be defended. It just needs to be. The silence of Tranquility Base is not an empty silence. It is a patient silence. It is waiting. It is waiting for the day when we might return. When a child of the future, born on Mars or on a drifting station, might come here. They will walk carefully, keeping their distance. They will look at that footprint, and they will know that this is where it started. But for now, it is just you. You and the gold foil. You and the long shadows. You and the silent silver ladder. Let the stillness enter your bones. Let the quiet of the vacuum slow your heart. You are standing in the most peaceful place in the universe. A place where nothing happens. A place where the past is perfectly preserved, waiting for the future to catch up. Rest in this museum. The lights are off. The door is closed. The history is safe. Chapter 14. The Great Distance. We have walked among the artifacts. We have stood in the silent museum of the landing sites. We have felt the stillness of the footprints. But now, we must pull back. We must lift our consciousness from the surface, rising higher and higher, until the lunar module is just a speck, until the craters are just texture, until the moon itself is a silver sphere hanging in the black velvet of space. From this vantage point, we can see the relationship between our world and its companion. It looks static. It looks eternal. The moon circles the earth circles the sun, a clockwork mechanism that has been ticking since the dawn of the solar system. But if we look closer, if we look with the eyes of deep time, we see that it is not static. It is moving. It is changing. It is saying goodbye. Remember the lasers we spoke of, the pulses of green light bouncing off the retroreflectors. They tell us something profound. Every year the moon moves away from us. It is a tiny distance, 3.8 centimeters, roughly the width of 2 fingers, roughly the speed at which your fingernails grow. It is a drift so slow that no human eye could ever perceive it. But over the course of millions of years, those centimeters add up to miles. Over billions of years, they add up to a great, widening gulf. Long ago, when the Earth was young and molten, the moon was much closer. It hung in the sky like a giant, terrifying shield, dominating the heavens. The tides it raised were miles high, scouring the continents, washing over the land with primal violence. But as the eons passed, the moon began to retreat, and it is still retreating. It is being pushed away by the very oceans it commands. Think of the tides. As the moon hovers over our planet, its gravity reaches down and pulls on the water. It creates a bulge in the ocean, a wave that travels around the world. But the Earth is spinning fast, much faster than the moon orbits. As the Earth spins, it drags that bulge of water forward, slightly ahead of the moon. That heavy bulge of water acts like a gravitational leash. It pulls on the moon, whipping it faster in its orbit. And in orbital mechanics, when you go faster, you go higher. You move further away. It is a transfer of energy. The Earth is slowing down, giving its rotational energy to the moon, pushing it slowly into the dark. It is a long, slow exhale, a gravitational hug that is slowly loosening its grip. This drift reminds us of the fleeting nature of our time here. We live in a very specific, very special moment in the history of the solar system. We live in the moment when the moon is exactly the right distance to cover the sun during an eclipse, creating that perfect ring of fire. A billion years ago, the moon was too close. It blocked the sun entirely. A billion years from now, it will be too far. It will be a small spot against the solar disk. But we are here now. We are here in the Goldilocks era of the moon. And it was in this era, in the blink of a cosmic eye, that we bridged the gap. Consider the timeline. The moon has existed for 4.5 billion years. It has sat there, silent and gray, accumulating craters, waiting. For almost all of that time, there was no life to look at it. Then there were eyes, simple eyes in the ocean. Then the eyes of dinosaurs. Then the eyes of early humans looking up with fear and wonder. And then, for a period of just 3 years, from 1969 to 1972, there were footprints. 3 years. In the geologic life of the moon, the Apollo program was not even a second. It was a camera flash in a dark room. A sudden burst of activity, rockets firing, radios crackling, rovers driving, and then silence again. The skeptics often ask, if we went, why haven't we gone back? They look at the 50-year gap and see it as proof of a lie. If Columbus sailed to America, they say, he didn't just go home and never return. People built cities. They built trade routes. Why is the moon still empty? But this assumes that progress is a straight line. It assumes that history is a ladder that we climb without stopping. But history is not a ladder. It is a tide. It flows in and it flows out. We went to the moon not because it was the logical next step for colonization, but because of a specific convergence of fear, money, and political will. It was a race. And when the race was won, the energy dissipated. The tide went out. It was not a failure of technology. The blueprints for the Saturn V did not vanish. The physics did not change. We did not forget how to build rockets. We simply chose, as a species, to turn our gaze back to the Earth for a while. We chose to build space stations in low orbit. We chose to send robots to Mars. We chose to look inward. The moon did not mind. It is patient. It has waited billions of years for the first visit. It can wait another century for the next. The landing sites, those museums we visited in our minds, are not abandoned. They are simply waiting for the reopening. The door is locked, but the key is still in our pocket. The capability remains. The knowledge is etched in books and in the minds of the new generation of engineers who are building the next ships right now. The Artemis, the Starship, the new Leviathans are rising in the hangars. The silence of the last 50 years is not an empty silence. It is a pregnant silence. It is the deep breath before the next leap. And as we wait, the moon continues to serve its oldest purpose. It serves as a mirror. When we look at the moon, we do not just see rock and dust. We see a reflection of ourselves. When we were superstitious, we saw gods and monsters. When we were rational, we saw orbits and geology. When we were at war, we saw strategic high ground. When we were explorers, we saw a destination. The moon reflects our curiosity. It reflects our bravery. But it also reflects our folly. The flags we planted are symbols of nations, standing on a world that has no borders. The plaques we left speak of peace for all mankind, written by men who were driven by a cold war. It reflects the duality of our nature. We are the creatures who can build a machine to travel through the vacuum, yet we are also the creatures who can doubt that we ever did it. We are the species that touches the stars, and then closes our eyes and says it was a dream. The moon holds all of this. It holds our dreams and our doubts in its gray regolith. It absorbs our radio waves and our laser pulses. It watches us fight and love and sleep. And through it all, it drifts, 3.8 centimeters a year, moving slowly away into the darkness. A silent companion that is gradually letting go of our hand, inviting us to follow it out into the deeper black. So tonight, as you lie here, feel the pull of that distance. Do not feel sad about the drift. Do not feel anxious about the pause in exploration. Feel the rhythm of it. The universe moves in cycles. The tide comes in. The tide goes out. The moon moves close. The moon moves away. We leave the earth. We return to the earth. It is a breathing, a cosmic respiration. We are currently in the exhale. We are in the quiet time, but the inhale is coming. The tide is turning. The ships are being built. The eyes are looking up again, and the moon is there. Bright, silent, waiting. It is not a fake. It is not a stage set. It is a whole world, suspended in the night, guarding the memories of the 12 men who walked upon it and keeping the light on for the billions who have yet to arrive. Rest in the knowledge of that patience. The distance is great, but it has been crossed once, and it will be crossed again. Chapter 15, The Sleep of Reason. We have come to the end of our journey. We have traveled from the humid marshes of Florida to the silent plains of the moon. We have touched the cold metal of the rockets. We have walked in the strange, bouncing gait of low gravity. We have stood in the shadows of the craters and looked back at our own blue home. And now, it is time to return. But we do not return to the noise. We do not return to the doubt. We return to a place of quiet acceptance. Throughout this night, we have looked at the evidence. We have held the rocks in our hands. We have watched the flags dance their silent physics. We have listened to the radio waves. But the final step of this voyage is not about logic. It is about release. There is an exhaustion that comes from fighting the truth. To constantly question, to constantly look for the wires and the mirrors, is a heavy burden for the mind to carry. It keeps the brain active, spinning its gears, looking for patterns in the noise. So, tonight, I invite you to put that burden down. Imagine that you are holding the heavy book of arguments in your hands. It is full of questions about shadows and radiation and stars. It is a heavy book. Now, imagine simply closing it. Feel the cover slide shut. Feel the weight of it leave your hands. Place it on a shelf in the back of your mind. You do not need it anymore. You are free to simply believe. And in that belief, there is a profound peace. There is a peace in knowing that we did it. That for one brief, shining moment in our history, we were capable of the impossible. We were capable of leaving the cave and touching the light. It means that the universe is open to us. It means that the stars are not just decorations painted on a ceiling, but destinations waiting for our return. It means that human beings are not stuck. We are travelers. Let that sense of wonder wash over you like a warm tide. You are part of a species that walked on the moon. That courage is in your DNA. That curiosity is in your blood. You can rest in that dignity. Now I want you to visualize the sky above where you lie right now. Perhaps it is cloudy. Perhaps it is clear. It does not matter. Beyond the roof, beyond the clouds, the moon is there. Visualize it hanging in the dark. It is heavy. It is ancient. It is round and cool and solid. It is not a story. It is a stone. It is floating in a sea of nothingness, suspended by the invisible threads of gravity. It is spinning, but so slowly that it seems still. It takes 27 days to turn once. A slow, majestic rotation that matches its orbit perfectly. I want you to sync your breathing with that slow movement. Inhale, visualizing the sunlight creeping across the lunar surface, warming the rocks, waking the dust. Exhale, visualizing the shadows stretching out, bringing the cool, restorative dark to the craters. Inhale, the light. Exhale, the dark. Your breath is part of the same rhythm that moves the tides. The water in the oceans rises and falls with the pull of that silver sphere. The water in your own body feels that same gentle tug. You are connected. You are tethered to the cosmos by a bond that cannot be broken. Drift on that tether now. Imagine you are floating in the space between the Earth and the Moon. You are weightless. There is no up. There is no down. There is only the drift. To your left, the Earth is a soft blue glow. It is sleeping. The lights of the cities are blinking out one by one. The continents are wrapped in clouds. To your right, the moon is a silver lantern. It is watching over you. It is the nightlight that never goes out. Feel the silence of this place. It is not a lonely silence. It is a supportive silence. It is the silence of a library after hours, the silence of a cathedral, the silence of a sleeping house. It holds you. It supports you. It allows your mind to expand, to unfurl, to let go of the tight knots of the day. We are going to turn off the lights now. Imagine we are in that viewing room where we started. The projector is slowing down. The fan is whirring to a halt. The beam of light that showed us the rockets and the craters is fading. The screen goes dark. The velvet walls seem to dissolve. The floor disappears. There is only you and the dark and the comfort. The questions are gone. The answers are gone. There is only the is. The moon is. The earth is. You are. Sleep is the final frontier. It is the daily voyage we all take into the unknown. It is a journey inward to a landscape as strange and beautiful as any lunar plane. You are the astronaut now. You are climbing into your capsule of blankets. You are closing the hatch. You are disconnecting from the launch tower of the waking world. You are ready to launch. But this launch is not made of fire. It is made of softness. It is a launch into the deep, quiet ocean of dreams. Let go of the controls. You do not need to steer. The trajectory is calculated. Your mind knows the way. It has made this journey thousands of times before. Just drift. Drift past the worries. They are just space debris floating harmlessly by. Drift past the plans for tomorrow. They are on another planet. Drift into the void. It is safe here. It is warm. The flag is standing still on the moon. The footprints are waiting. The laser is bouncing back and forth, ticking off the seconds, watching over you like a metronome. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The distance is growing. The earth is getting smaller. The moon is getting closer. You are floating in the great, beautiful silence. Everything is exactly as it should be. The universe is working perfectly. The physics are sound. The math is correct. You can sleep. Good night to the rockets cooling in the museums. Good night to the dust, sharp and silent. Good night to the shadows, long and deep. Good night to the astronauts wherever they are. Good night, Earth. Good night, Moon.